us. Yeah, we're so thrilled to have you here today to learn about the Runaway and Homeless Youth and Trafficking Prevention Act of 2023. It's going to be a really informative webinar. We're going to share all about the legislation and also about how you can get involved. But before all of that, if I could just have everyone introduce yourself in the chat with your name, pronouns, organization, city, state, and an emoji to show how your day is going so far. I will go ahead and drop my introduction in the chat. Heather Lavoie, I am the policy associate with the National Network for Youth. I use she, her pronouns, and you'll have to wait and see my emoji in the chat.
We just take them up in the pan. They'll still taste just as delicious. Hey, Sandy. Now, before we take a look at our we need to look around and see if there are any clues. Tell us what happened to the snack basket. All I see is a whole lot of sugar. Me too. But let's take a closer look.
All right. Thank you all for dropping some introductions in the chat. I'm just going to shout some folks out. I see a New Haven, Connecticut. Good to see you, Wayne. I see a Pittsburgh, Texas from Mary Lou. Lindsay from Wisconsin. I see Chris from New Mexico. Amazing, amazing, amazing. We've got folks from all over. Just goes to show how important this legislation is to us all over the country. It's going to have wide-ranging impacts if we're successful getting it passed. And luckily here today, we're going to tell you all about how you can help us get that done. Alrighty, I see Illinois, Phoenix, Arizona. Amazing. I hope it's nice and warm there. Thank you all so much for joining us. So, Honolulu, Hawaii, amazing. So just so you know, you can ask us questions throughout this webinar in the chat. I will be monitoring it. These slides in the recording will be available on our website after the presentation is over. It's actually, we have already uploaded the slides to the website. I'll be dropping the link in the chat for the slides shortly. And then we're also going to be sharing a survey at the end of the webinar, just for some feedback. So we'd really appreciate if y'all could fill that out after the webinar. Awesome. As more folks join, Washington, D.C., good to see you, Irvin. Caroline from Oakland. Amazing. It's so great to see you all today. Thank you again for joining us. We will continue on in just a couple of minutes. All righty, I just went ahead and dropped our slides for today's presentation in the chat. So now you all will have access to these slides right now and after the presentation. We will also be sending them out after the webinar, so don't you worry. On that note, I think we can go ahead and start looking at our agenda today. Awesome. So on our agenda today, we're gonna, as we already have been, just continue on with our brief introductions in the chat. We're going to do an overview of the Runaway and Homeless Youth program. We are going to talk about what's included in the Runaway and Homeless Youth Trafficking Prevention Act of 2023. We're going to talk over our strategy and how you can get involved to help us get this legislation passed. And then we're going to take some questions. And then we can go on to the next slide. For those of you who don't know us, we are the National Network for Youth. We work to ensure that no young person should ever experience homelessness. Unfortunately, every year, an estimated 4.2 million youth and young adults do experience homelessness. But we at the National Network for Youth are on a mission to transform systems to ensure that we can prevent this for young people in the future and hopefully support those currently experiencing homelessness right now. Without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic over to the National Network's Executive Director, Darla Bardine.
Thank you, Heather. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm excited you all have joined us today. Again, for those of you who aren't super familiar with us or me, my name's Darla Bardine. I'm the Executive Director here at the National Network for Youth. It's my honor to serve. Our work is in 3 primary buckets, though they are very intersectional. So we have a broad strategy to transform federal policy to end youth and young adult homelessness. If folks could mute themselves, please. We also partner with youth and young adults who have experienced homelessness to develop our policy strategies, to advocate, to develop our programs and implement. And we also partner with communities to accelerate progress to prevent and end youth and young adult homelessness. We are also a membership organization. If you're not a member, we encourage you to join. I see a lot of members here today. So hello, welcome to our NN for White members. So now I'm gonna be talking about the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act pretty briefly, just for those of you who are not familiar with this existing federal program. So the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act, and we do have a policy brief about the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act. It's on our website, and I think Heather's gonna put a chat in, put a link in the chat. But the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act will be celebrating 50 years next year, just like the National Network for Youth. So it became law in 1974 as part of the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act. So it's part of juvenile justice reform. The highest amount of federal appropriations this program has received is $146.28 million. That's how much it was funded at in FY23. The program was last reauthorized in 2018, but the last full reauthorization was actually 5 years before that. So the program provides base funding to communities to develop community-based responses to youth and young adult homelessness. And so the funding that it provides are in these 5 buckets. So community-based organizations can apply directly to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Family and Youth Services Bureau for a grant to provide street outreach services. So that's education, prevention, treatment, counseling, connection, referrals to vital services, with the purpose really being to prevent sexual abuse and human trafficking for youth at risk of and experiencing trafficking and homelessness. The second bucket of funding is the Basic Center program, and that's really short-term crisis housing with supportive services for minors who are experiencing homelessness. So you have to be under the age of 18 to access that support. And then the third bucket of funding is a transitional living program and the maternity group home. So the transitional living program is for youth. It provides longer-term housing with supportive services, and the age range there is 16 to 22. And then the maternity group home provides, again, longer-term housing with supportive services for pregnant and parenting young people. The fourth bucket that's funded currently by the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act is the National Communication System. So that's 24/7, year-round, national phone, text, and online communication systems for youth and families in crisis, and to refer young people to housing and services and reunify families. So that's our 1-800-RUNAWAY. And then there's funding for the National Technical Assistance Center. So that's what we call RHYTPA, the Runaway and Homeless Youth Training and Technical Assistance Center. So that's what's currently funded by the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act and the different age ranges. And in general, I'm not going to read everything on here, but just for folks who aren't familiar with this program at HHS, the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act programs can serve homeless youth, runaway youth, street youth, and youth at risk of separation from the family. And if folks are having questions, please put them in chat. I'll definitely try to answer them as I go or get to them at the end. So this is just a little bit of a history of funding levels for the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act program and kind of our estimates of how much money that's actually providing per young person based on the 4.2 million estimate that we have. So the highest amount, the most recent amount, like I said, was the 146 million for FY 2023. For those of you who follow federal policy closely, FY 24 is still not final. But what we have seen in bills is that we're level funded. So for us, it would be considered a win to be flat funded. For FY 24 at 146 million. A lot of other programs.
I think diabetes office. I get.
Can you help with muting, please?
Here.
A lot of other programs are facing cuts. So this is just some data and again, you have these slides, but this is just data that shows the effectiveness of Runaway and Homeless Youth Act programs. So hopefully, you can refer to this later. I'm definitely not gonna go through it because we have a lot to cover. So next, I'm going to talk about what are the different improvements that would be made to the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act program when the Runaway and Homeless Youth and Trafficking Prevention Act of 2023 is passed into law. So first I want to start off by saying there are some changes to the bill text from when this legislation was introduced last year in 2022. We were very close last year to the bill passing, but there was holds on it. So that being said, there were a couple of changes that we made this time to hopefully make it a little bit more likely to pass. So we removed and gender responsive from the bill in 2 places. Otherwise, we would have had to have defined it and not in the way that we would have supported. We did add a definition of trauma-informed to the bill. And we added to the findings around these community-based programs work to reunify youth with their family when safe and appropriate. And then right now, the language says that evaluations have to be conducted on site. So we added that they can be conducted virtually as well as on site. So those are the changes from last year. So there are some programs that the Runaway and Homeless Youth Trafficking Prevention Act would make across all Runaway and Homeless Youth Act programs. And that's what you see on this slide. So all grants would become 5 years. So if you are awarded a grant, it would be a per funding amount per year for 5 years. The grant opportunities would be released in a staggered amount, so every 2 to 3 years. So it's not that folks would have to wait 5 years to apply again if they don't get a grant 1 year. The grant award notice would have to be 90 days in advance of the start date. So right now, what is common practice is that folks find out if they get another 3-year grant like the day before or after their grant actually ends. This would actually require the Family and Youth Services Bureau to notify all new or renewing grantees to be told if they're getting another grant 90 days in advance. One, if you're a new grantee, then that would give you time to ramp up services and get things prepared for whenever that grant does start 3 months in advance. If you're a current grantee and you are not renewed, then that gives you 90 days to make a plan for how those young people in your care are going to be cared for, or for you to go to your city council or go to your state and say, hey, look, I'm losing funding. I need, I have 90 days to raise the funds that I'm, losing from this federal grant. It also would establish an appeals process if an applicant believes that their application was incorrectly scored. It would require geographic distribution to be considered when issuing grants. This is to make sure that lower population density areas, more rural communities are competitive in receiving these funds. Programs would be required to provide training to their staff on human trafficking, trauma, sexual abuse, and assault. There would be a mandatory non-discriminatory practices clause. Right now, we have the non-discrimination clause in regulation, which obviously can be changed depending on the administration. This would actually put it into statute. It would change the use of facilities to projects, and it would require that all services be trauma-informed, age, gender, and culturally and linguistically appropriate. So other changes to the street outreach program, there is updated language around youth who have been trafficked, and it also adds the option of online and social media methods in terms of outreaching to young people. So making that a little bit more flexible and relevant to today's young people. Basic Center program, the length of stay would increase from 21 days, which is what it is now, to 30 days or longer as state laws allow. So that means that if you were licensed in a state that allowed a youth shelter to serve young people for 90 days, then you would be allowed to use your Basic Center program money to serve minors for up to 90 days. Also, services could be provided to runaway youth, street youth, homeless youth, and youth at risk of separation from their family or at risk of becoming homeless. For the transitional living program, some of the changes there and maternity group home, it says that we would be able to, or grantees would be able to involve people identified as family of youth in counseling and therapeutic services as appropriate. So it's really about chosen family and not just biological family that would be eligible to be included in family therapy and counseling services. Required coordination with the McKinney-Vento homeless liaison in the community, and to ensure that young people know they are eligible to apply for the free application of federal student aid, so the FAFSA, and that grantees would help youth complete it because it's pretty complicated for them. Other changes TLP would make, it would actually increase the age to up to 25. Right now, the max age is 22. And then the Basic Center program, right now, we would change the language so that grantees can serve a minimum of 4 youth and a maximum of 20 youth per project, unless regulation allows a higher maximum. So again, if you could get a license to serve 25 young people in a BCP project, that would be fine. We also added language clarifying that grantees can have mixed project facilities with segregated access and programming, allowing for more than 20 beds in a building. There are some challenges now around young people or around grantees having multiple 20-bed programs within a building due to some challenges with the regulation, not actually the law. So this would fix that within the law. Oh, here's some of the other I already mentioned the increase in age for TLP. Also, there would be aftercare services you could provide if possible, as well as transition plans developed for every young person in a transitional living program or maternity group home, and that those transition plans would be written in partnership with the youth. The national communication system, there's an expansion of basically services there to include online and social media. And then the National Training and Technical Assistance Center, really adding on-site and web-based training techniques such as on-demand and online learning. So administration, really giving the secretary the power to waive some program requirements in the events of extraordinary circumstances, such as national disasters, public health, emergency, and financial crisis. What we found during the pandemic when there were lockdowns, that these 21-day lengths of stay or transitional living program lengths of stay that were getting close to the end, and yet providers were on a lockdown and not allowed to move youth out, that it would have really been helpful if there could have been some flexibility in some of the requirements of the RHYA program, as our providers were doing an amazing job serving young people during the pandemic. So this would add in kind of the power of the secretary to issue guidance around that flexibility without Congress having to take action to give RHYA programs flexibility in the case of any of those circumstances. Evaluations would be for, once every 5 years. Right now it says every 3 years. And then there would be, new performance standards would be issued within 1 year of enactment. So basically within 1 year of this becoming law. So the new thing is there's a new prevention services program. So there's a new funding bucket that would come into play. It's called the PSP, the Prevention Services Program. The purpose is to prevent youth from running away or becoming a homeless or street youth. That's how we had to write it. We like to say youth experiencing homelessness, but that's how we had to write it legally. And then an eligible applicant would be to apply for a prevention services program grant is basically when you would apply for a basic center program grant, a transitional living program grant, or maternity group home grant. You could also apply for a prevention services grant, because that would get added on to a BCP, TLP, or MGH grant. So it's not possible to just get a prevention services program grant if you are not successful in also receiving a basic center program, transitional living program, or maternity group home grant. And so what that would do is that would provide an extra $75,000 per year, in addition to the funding of the base grant that you would have to be successful in receiving. And that in terms of receiving this funding, priority will be given to organizations that have experience in serving runaway and homeless youth, street youth, and youth at risk of separation from their family. This is kind of how prevention services is defined. And it really means services to prevent youth from becoming a runaway youth, from becoming a street youth, from becoming a homeless youth. And again, I had to write it that way because that's how the language, that's how the definitions are within the law itself. So those services include individual, family, group, and peer counseling, family mediation, assessing strengths, vulnerabilities, and needs of youth, connecting youth to public services and housing options, emergency respite care, connecting youth to education and employment programs, case management and resource navigation, and activities to improve access to local mental health and substance use treatment and prevention. The other definitions are around trafficking, and that's just referencing the definitions of sex and labor trafficking in the Federal Trafficking Victims Protection Act. And then we also added the definition of culturally and linguistically appropriate, which refers to the national standards for culturally and linguistically appropriate services. And that's at HHS and the Office of Minority Health. And we do have the link there if folks are interested. So in terms of grant funding levels, Oh, sorry. Yes. We'll look at this slide. So, depending on Congress, because Congress is the appropriations process through Congress, which is what we're waiting for Congress to finish now. If the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act program is funded at more than 200 million, or is funded at less than 200 million, then grants would be 200,000 per year to 275,000 per year. Sorry for the typo on that side. If the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act program is funded at more than 200 million, then the grants would be 225 to 275,000 per year. Like I said, the prevention services program would be an additional 75,000 per year on top of those, the BCP, TLP, and MGH grants. Now, the authorized funding level. This is how much money the bill says this program should be funded at. Now, what the Appropriations Committee does could be something completely different, because this is not a mandatory funded program. It's still up to the discretion of the Appropriations Committee to set the overall funding level for each program. But what we know is that having these higher funding levels in an authorizing bill that becomes law, that's what usually leads to significant increases in funding through the appropriations process. So it's really a signal from the authorizing committee to the Appropriations Committee as to how much this program should be funded at. So the consolidated programs, which includes Basic Center program, Transitional Living program, and Maternity Group Home, is 200 million per year. The Street Outreach program is 500 million per year. The Prevention Services program would be 67.5 million per year. And then a National Prevalence Estimates and Characteristics research is authorized at 2 million per year every 3 years. So this would increase the total authorized amount to 319.5 million. Right now, we're authorized at 150 million and appropriated at 146 million. So now we're going to shift. I know there's a couple of questions in chat. The number of organizations, it varies. It's anywhere from like 350 to 500 community-based organizations of very different sizes that serve youth and young adults. So it's very vast. There is no national number of youth who are turned away from shelters. That's not data that's kept or shared anywhere. I already did cover the transition planning. Dana, I think I got to that after you put that question in there. If not, please let me know. And the funding for this program, it does not cover the true cost of what it takes to serve young people. Obviously, it is considered base funding for programs and setting national standards of best practice and oversight for youth and young adults. Keep the questions coming. All right, I'm going to shift to Congress strategy. And I'm going to talk about all the resources we have, the link to the actual bill text, the section by section, everything. I will get there. So our current context for U.S. Congress, we are in the first year of a 2-year congressional session, the 118th. So any bills that did not get passed last year or in the previous session had to be reintroduced. Luckily, we've now been reintroduced. The Democrats control the Senate and the executive branch, and the Republicans control the House. This means that having a bipartisan approach is incredibly important. You're not going to get anything done without support from both sides of the aisle. This is the path from this bill becoming a law. So it's been introduced in the House and the Senate, so bipartisan, bicameral. We had to replace our Democratic champions in both the House and the Senate this year, which took us some time, and get everybody on board. Now the bills have been referred to their respective committees. So the committee in the Senate that has jurisdiction over this legislation is the Senate Judiciary Committee, and the House committee with jurisdiction is the House Education and Labor Committee. So in an ideal world, each committee will, hold a hearing on the legislation, then call the committee to vote. Both committees pass the legislation out of committee to the floor, and then the full floors vote and pass the legislation through both chambers. That is not typically how Congress operates these days, due to the polarization and political dysfunction. So I'll talk a little bit more about our strategy. But what's important is that it has to be the same exact bill that passes both chambers, and obviously with a majority vote, and then it would be sent to the president to sign, and then our bill would become a law. And yes, the presentation deck and the recording will be sent out after the webinar, and the link to the slides were already provided. Okay, so this is where we are. Our new champions, so Senator Durbin came on as our champion Democrat in the Senate this year because Senator Leahy retired. Senator Collins remains our Republican champion in the Senate. Representative Bonamici from Oregon came on as our new Democratic champion in the House this year because Representative Yarmouth from Louisville, Kentucky retired. Representative Bacon remained our Republican champion in the House. And new this year, Representative Nunn joined us as an original co-sponsor at introduction, as well as Representative McGarvey, who took over Yarmouth's seat from Louisville, Kentucky. So now that we have bills introduced, yay, the ask is that every member of Congress, so both of your U.S. senators, all of your U.S. representatives, co-sponsor the Runaway and Homeless Youth Trafficking Prevention Act. If you are a constituent of any member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, the House Ed and Labor Committee, then your outreach to your representatives is even more important. And I'll explain that in the next slides. So the current strategy is to try to move the bill through the Senate first. I won't get into the House dysfunction, but nothing's moving through the House right now. So we've been told that we need one Republican on the Senate Judiciary Committee to co-sponsor the Runaway and Homeless Youth Trafficking Prevention Act in order for Chairman Durbin. So luckily our Democratic champion is chair of the Judiciary Committee by design, obviously. So then Chairman Durbin will bring the bill up for a vote in committee if we can get a Republican on the Senate Judiciary Committee to join as a co-sponsor. Then, once that happens and it passes through the Senate Judiciary Committee, then the ask is for Majority Leader Schumer to bring the bill to the floor for a vote, or to attach it to whatever package is moving, which is often what happens now. Then, in an ideal world, the House Ed and Labor Committee would then take up the bill, have a vote, pass it through. I need to update the speaker's name here in the House. But that seems a little less likely. So the other path here is it's in a package that just goes through the House, as opposed to House Ed and Labor moving it. If any of you all are in Virginia Fox's district in North Carolina and have a good relationship, then we need to talk. So these are the members of the committees. So you see here, our champion is Chairman Durbin from Illinois. He's our champion for here. This is the Republicans. We need one Republican to join as a co-sponsor. So that is Ranking Member Graham from South Carolina, Senator Blackburn from Tennessee, Senator Cornyn and Cruz from Texas are both on here, Senator Cotton from Arizona, Senator Grassley from Iowa, Senator Hawley from Missouri, Senator Kennedy from Louisiana, Senator Lee from Utah, and Senator Tillis from North Carolina. So hopefully now you all kind of have an idea if any of your senators are on the very important Senate Judiciary Committee. Now, this is the House Education and Workforce Committee members. If folks have representatives on here, then definitely getting them on as a co-sponsor would be very important. So now I'm going to kind of shift into what's the ask, what are the next steps here? So the goal is for all of you to email both of your US senators and all of your US reps. Now I say all because that doesn't really make a lot of sense, right? Because everybody has one US rep, right? Based on where you live. But if you are from a community-based organization, maybe where you live has a different US rep than the location of where you work, where your community-based organization is located. So you could potentially reach out to multiple US representatives. We have some very large member agencies who actually serve young people across, multiple counties and a pretty large area that encompasses, maybe 5 US representatives. This is really the time to reach out to everybody. And another kind of useful strategy and tactic is if you're, part of an organization that has a board of directors, asking your board of directors to email their elected officials, reach out, utilize their networks as well. We have found that to be incredibly effective in terms of just broadening the number of people who are reaching out and advocating. And many of you on here I know are in email communications, meet regularly with the staffers of your US Senate offices and your US representative. So you already know the email addresses of the staffers, you know who to contact, you know who to email. But if you do not, we are here to support you. We have a legislator lookup tool on our website. You can put in your address and it'll tell you who your representatives are. It'll have a phone number you can call if you want to schedule a meeting. And the meeting can be in person, it can be on Zoom. It's very common now, to have Zoom meetings with your elected officials. One good thing to come out of COVID is we can all, do advocacy in our yoga pants from the comfort of our home. We don't have to necessarily travel to in-person meetings. Also, you can email Heather, who you all met at the beginning, our amazing policy associate, and she can help provide contact information. So if you email her, though, make sure you give her your address or the names of your senators and your US rep, because she won't know who to look up if she doesn't know the address or the names of your elected officials. And also we have provided a template email hyperlinked there. I'm not sure if Heather can send that template in chat, but we will send it out afterwards. So it's just a draft template email. You can edit it however you want, make it better, add all the the local information, the state information, any data, any kind of context you can. And it's really about very clearly asking them to co-sponsor the legislation this month. Give them a deadline. And on the next slide, I'm going to talk about, it's really important to attach some materials to the email that you sent. Most of the time you are emailing staffers for your elected officials, and they do not know about the issue of youth homelessness. They probably don't know about the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act program, unless, of course, you have, many of you do have long-term relationships with your elected officials. And they probably don't know about the Runaway and Homeless Youth Trafficking Prevention Act, again, unless you've met with them about this bill in the past. Then you can just kind of give them the updates on that one slide about like what's new from last year to this year. But it's really about asking them to co-sponsor it and to do so this month. In your email, I didn't add it, but you can also ask for a meeting to discuss the legislation. Put in some dates and times you're available to just move things along. I'm going to go to the next slide and then back to this one, because we do have a Take Action Center page on the Runaway and Homeless Youth Trafficking Prevention Act. And important to add as attachments to the emails that you're sending to the congressional offices is you want to include a fact sheet on the bill, a section by section of the bill. You can include bill text, or you can just hyperlink to it. It's, on congress.gov, and the links are to the bills are also on our website. And then you want to include a list of endorsing organizations. Now, why it's important to include all 4 of those things is because when you're asking an elected official to co-sponsor a legislation, and you're talking to that staffer who covers that issue, they have a million things on their plate, right? And what they need to do is they need to write a memo to their boss, making the recommendation that they co-sponsor the Runaway and Homeless Youth Trafficking Prevention Act. What the combination of the fact sheet, the section by section, the endorsing organizations does is that gives the staffer everything they need to copy and paste it into a memo to their boss. So you are helping that staffer do their job by providing those materials. You can also include a link to our page, to the Take Action Center page. So I hope that makes sense. The other thing is we are asking for organizational endorsement. So if you are an organization that does endorse legislation, it's basically just saying your organization supports the Runaway and Homeless Youth Trafficking Prevention Act. It's saying that and nothing else. There is a link again on our website. You can just fill out a Google form. Every Friday, we'll be updating the list of endorsing organizations that are here on our website. Also, we have a social media toolkit that Heather created for us. So you can share with your networks about taking action, getting involved, sending an email, just educating the general public about the importance of this legislation. So in that social media toolkit, there are graphics you can use, there's draft text, there's even draft text for you to use in a newsletter that you put out. And then also on our Take Action page, there's a tool. I don't want you to use this only. You need to send direct emails to staffers, not just filling out this form on our website. But you can use this form on our website. You can put in your address, and then it'll automatically send a pre-populated email, and you can even edit that email. But it doesn't have as much of an impact as you sending an email directly with attachments, requesting a meeting, and basically saying, we want you to co-sponsor this month. Before I move on to the next piece, I want to emphasize the importance of following up. So hopefully you all will get your emails out soon, this week or next week. Then I want you to put on your calendar 2 weeks from the time you sent that email, a reminder that you should follow up if you have not heard back from your elected officials about the bill, and you ping them. So we need to kind of live in our power and hold our elected officials accountable. And really, I am asking you to co-sponsor and really expect a response and an answer. Because there's a lot coming at staffers, so you have to be, persistent. So we are also launching a Runaway and Homeless Youth Trafficking Prevention Act Action Coalition. It will be this monthly on the second Tuesday from 2 to 2:30. We know everybody is busy. We are going to keep it short, sweet, direct, and action-oriented. So it'll just be 30 minutes of your time, unless you want to stay on longer and hang out with Heather and I. We'd love it. But you can register to join. You can fill out a Google form. Filling out that form means that we'll send you the agenda. We'll add you to the calendar invite with the Zoom link, so you have all the information you need to join. And we invite all of you to join us in that. So these are just some talking points. If you're having meetings, if you're, taking action, it's National Runaway Prevention Month. Some folks are doing events at Capitol Hill, rallies. It's just important to use data. So the national data is that 4.2 million young people experience homelessness on their own every year. And by on your own, we mean unaccompanied by a parent or legal guardian. Many young people are accompanied by their children, right? So a lot of young people are parents themselves. And just some key talking points about the updates, like why we need the Runaway and Homeless Youth Trafficking and Prevention Act to pass, is that we need key updates to the existing federal Runaway and Homeless Youth Act program. So we need to, increase efforts to combat human trafficking. We need to prohibit discrimination because of the disproportionate number of LGBTQ youth and BIPOC youth that experience homelessness. It takes more, than 21 days to serve a lot of young people well and effectively. So we need to increase that to the 30 days or longer as state laws allow. We need to increase the grant award amount and the overall program funding. We need to increase the age for transitional living programs. We need to fix the 20-bed per building regulation issue. So these are just some talking points. Hopefully you all know your audience, know what your elected officials are interested in. Some folks are very, interested in, preventing and ending homelessness. Some folks are very interested in, ending chronic adult homelessness. So really making the point that addressing youth homelessness does end chronic adult homelessness, because it prevents young people from becoming the future chronically homeless adults. And we have research from communities that show that up to 40% of chronically homeless adults were first homeless under the age of 25. So you can make the connection there. Definitely, all the research shows that storytelling, being strategic in your advocacy, really making a heart connection, a personal connection. What do you have in common with the person you're meeting with? Connect the dots. How can you share data, share examples, really educate the mind of a policymaker, and then make the connection to political health. Like, what is the risk to society, to the community they represent, if they're not taking action on preventing and ending youth and young adult homelessness. And I hope that you all believe you are powerful. Young people with lived experiences, service provider experts at the community level, in schools, community advocates, you are powerful. You have expertise, and each and every one of you should be shaping the policies that are created. And I will add that if you aren't outreaching, meeting, educating to your policymakers, then they definitely don't know what we know around the solutions that are needed to truly prevent and end youth homelessness in America. We have a summit. We hope we'll see you. It's next year. You can use your administrative funds to come. I don't know if you have a link to register. Oh, yes. Sorry, I'm going to get to questions and then I'll come back to these. So yes, the research I quoted that up to 40% of chronically homeless adults were first homeless under the age of 25. So I'm glad Oregon's going to be there. We look forward to seeing you at the National Summit. So that's research. So there's King County research, Twin Cities, so Minneapolis, St. Paul, and then LA research. And we have the exact survey data and research if folks want it. Just send us an email. But yes, there's quite a few detailed assessments that have found that to be true. Heather, help me with questions. Anything I didn't answer? Maybe. Oh, so if Congress funds the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act at under 200 million, which I'm going to need to tweak that slide a little bit before we send it out, because I think it's a little unclear, then the funding levels for the grants, the individual grants, are 200,000 to 250,000. So right now, the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act is funded at 146.28 million, right? So, so once this becomes law, then the range for those grants would be anywhere from 200,000 a year to 250,000 a year. And previously, and it would be, you know, a 5-year grant. So you'd get that amount per year per grant. Sorry, are there any other questions that I missed? Right. So if the bill doesn't make it out of committee this year, then we do have next year. The challenge with next year is it's election year, right? So a lot of folks, a lot of our elected officials are going to be out campaigning for their party, for themselves. It's presidential election. So there's kind of a lot of distraction and just really honestly less work days. That's why the emphasis is really is getting as many co-sponsors as we can now and really getting a Republican on the Senate Judiciary Committee, because then that really signals to our champions that we have a viable bill that should go for markup in the Senate Judiciary Committee, and it really should be on the radar of leadership in the Senate. I can't say about it being on the radar of leadership in the House, but we will do our best, do our meetings, kind of make all that outreach. Whenever you're in the political environment like this and you don't have that many co-sponsors, your bill just really isn't taken seriously by Congress, because most bills introduced never get a vote, never get a markup. So that's why it's just really, really important around getting as many co-sponsors as possible. I see a question from Efren. So maybe I went over it too quickly, but what is in the bill is that there would be standards, new performance standards created within a year after introduction. But right now, there's a lot of standards for grantees, for Runaway and Homeless Youth Act grantees. You can look at the regulations. The federal regulations are very detailed. The FAQs are very detailed. If you look at the NOFOs that come out, they require a lot. There are a lot of standards and a lot of requirements placed on grantees under the Federal Runaway and Homeless Youth Act. Any other questions? Government shutdown. Oh, Jackie. It seems likely. Last time I called it right, I figured they'd come up with a CR at the last minute. There's just a lot of dysfunction in the House right now, and that's what the US House is responsible for the origin of all federal spending. I'm hoping there isn't a shutdown because I think it would be a long shutdown, but I think there might be a government shutdown. I will tell you, I was told that if there is a government shutdown, grantees within the Administration on Children and Families will be receiving pre-prepared communication. So if you are an ACF grantee, there is already communications prepared to just kind of provide information, because I know folks have different funding cycles, different renewal cycles, different types of grant agreement within all the different ACF programs, which there are many. So if there is a shutdown, then there will be communications that will go out, I'm guessing from most federal agencies to their grantees, if there's questions around drawdown and all of that. And the other question that remains for me is, if there's government shutdown, does RHYTPA continue? Because that is a federally funded conference. I think so, because that money already went out. I think the question will be if federal agency staff would be able to travel to RHYTPA in Seattle if the federal government is technically shut down. Any other questions? And you have our emails here on the screen. Again, another shout out for membership. If you're not a member, we'd love to have you join us. We do consulting work, so we enter into contracts, fee for service. If you are a member, you get a discount, and all of our members do get 2 hours of free consulting. We provide a lot of support on a lot of different things. This is just a snapshot of some of the support that we provide. You can just fill out if you're interested in just having a conversation. There's a form on our website you can fill out, and we'll meet with you and see if we can help. Oh, thank you, Erin. Erin heard that RHYTPA staff would attempt to run the conference without the federal folks. Yeah, so that's what I figured, because basically the federal money has already gone out to the RHYTPA youth collaboratory who has that RHYTPA conference, but it would be down some federal staff. I do wonder if some of the political staff would be able to travel there at least to speak and participate, because often I have found there to be some exceptions to what political appointees can do as opposed to federal career staff in the midst of a government shutdown. Thanks for sharing that, Erin. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. I'm right on time. I'm very proud of myself for that. I was worried about all the content, but please reach out with any questions, and we are happy to help connect you to your elected officials. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your week. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. We will be sending out these slides just as a reminder in an email after the webinar, along with a recording of this.